All right, moving on to the housing, and as you can see here, this this isn't so great. So as I just said, this engine was found in the FC RX7, or the second generation Mazda RX7. It is naturally aspirated in this form here, although turbo models also available in the FC. This engine is a 6-port, as you can see on the side here, by the 6 intake ports. The turbo engines were all 4-port engines, so slightly different. So this engine is actually seized. I don't think it's ever been apart in its life, so it's been together for 35 years. It hasn't run or anything in over 20, so let's rip it apart and see what's lurking inside. First thing we'll do is we'll take off the oil pan. As you can see, the oil pan bolts all the way around here, so without taking this off, you can't get the giant rotary ice cream sandwich apart, which is all these individual parts. So, all right, let's whack this off and see what's inside. I should probably whack the gloves out. Probably a spider or something will jump out of this. All right, next thing we need to do is get this oil pan off. Now, these are often either just a gasket, or might use silicone, because the rotary is pretty common to leak because there's so many pieces joining it together. So I'll just get a gasket scraper, start at the back here, and we'll hammer it out. That's come apart super easy. All right, what we have inside there is some leaves and a bit of grossness, but nothing really too untoward. Another leaf here in the timing cover. Just take the oil pickup off now. This is the pickup. All looks pretty good. All right, so next thing you'd normally do would be you'd want to take the giant 54mm nut off the back here and loosen that up, and same as the 19mm nut on the front. Don't have the 54mm nut here, so you don't have to worry about that, and we can just start with the fun stuff and start tearing into this thing. So these are 17mm bolts. To undo a rotary engine, all you really need is a 19mm, 17mm, 10mm, 12mm, and 54mm, and you can basically undo the entire thing. So they are metric. It's Japanese engine, so it's metric. I know I see a lot of people in America saying this is a 2 1/8 inch or something bolt for the flow on the back. It's a metric engine. It's 54mm. So now this engine is seized, and I'm assuming everything in here is ruined that. So I'm not going to worry about gently breaking these first and then doing them off. I'm just going to rattle gun them off and get the old 36-volt high cokie on it and smash them all out, just so we can get it over and done with. But yeah, I'm going to assume most of this engine is throwaway, but we'll see what's inside anyway. All right, cue the time lapse, because this might take a while. All right, straight off the bat, I can smell like that burnt cooling smell, because these bolts were in there good and proper. It took a fair ugga-duggers to get them out. So let's rip all these tension bolts out, these ultra long bolts, and let's see what's actually hiding inside here. So if you're wondering how a Mazda rotary engine's held together, these massive long bolts are what holds that sandwich all together. All right, let's see if we can get this off. A few gentle taps. There's a dowel here and up here, so I've just got to sort of delicately pry around that. Looks like it's going to come off. Whoa. Wow. Alrighty. Alright, so that is one of the irons, and you can see a rusted in mark of where the rotor was. So let's put that on the bench and continue on with this. Right, next up we have the rotor. Obviously every seal here, this corner seal's actually got some little bit of spring to it, side seal, sorry. All control rings, well, one popped out of the motor and one's still in here. That is seized in there. That does not want to come out at all. All right, this is just some penetrating oil. I'm going to try and spray that in there to see if it can maybe, sometimes stuff's just rusted in and just needs to be loosened up. But just see, there we go. Again, I'm not going to be using any of this engine by the looks of it, so that is why I'm getting the crowbar in here and just ruining this, because I can see already that these housings are pretty torched, they're a bit scarred there, so I don't think I'll be using these again. Cell engine's pretty torched. Looks like there's a groove that's been cut in all the way there, so... Oh, that move a bit. Here we go. Yep, that's worked. Oh, geez, it was coming up. Alrighty. Bloody hell. All control rings are stuck in, so there is one very, very carboned up rotor. All the look at that. There is still spring in that apex seal. So none of the seals are blown. Those bearings look really good. Those bearings actually look very new, to be honest. So yeah, this rotor's obviously got every seal impacted in because of the rust in that now, but overall, this rotor doesn't look too bad. Now I'm going to pull these dowels. You can see these two dowels here. They locate sort of the engine so it doesn't move apart and keep it in place. I've got a special tool here. That tool just threads into the dowel, and then this end threads into the slide hammer, and I'll be able to pull it out. What's going on, buddy? Don't lick that, that's oil, that's gross. Now I'll just pull this engine back up to here for now, because if I pull that other dowel, it could potentially go flying. See, just like that. Just have to lift this up here so it doesn't fall out. All right, there's our housing off. Doesn't actually look too bad in there, but you can definitely see some definite signs of wear and tear. All right, huge amount of crud there where the water jacket is. That's pretty normal actually. This is an oil control ring and a spring, and the remnants of the oil control ring that's meant to be in here is just dissolved basically, so yep. Now in order to get this main shaft out, normally you'd have to push on the front of the engine and then rotate in a certain way, but because this is seized, this is going to be actually really difficult to do. So yeah, I'm going to just have to belt it and see what comes out as one piece while I'm doing it. What I'm going to do, I can pull the dowels through here, which is what I'm going to do. But first, let's have a bit of a look-see in under the front cover. Seems over the years this engine might have been robbed of some of its stuff, because definitely some stuff missing. What's missing here is a crank angle sensor, water pump setup, and a front pulley. This is the nut that normally holds all the hub and everything together. Whew, that was on there good and proper. Right, so what you can see now is the front of the engine. You have this, which is this drives the distributor or the crank angle sensor to give the triggers to the ECU or distributor when to fire ignition. Next up, you have oil pump gear, which drives the oil pump, which is here. Next, you have a front counterweight that balances the engine, and then we have a bearing stack which sets the end float of the shaft. So this is going to be tough to get off. We're going to give it a go, but yeah, that's it. You want to come off, don't you? Let's loosen that enough that the front stack, the rear stack wants to start coming. So let's just, yeah, that's cool. This is not how you would normally disassemble a rotary engine, but like any engine that's got some kind of mechanical problem, you just have to do whatever you can do. Alrighty. Drop it this way just so I can be sure it's not going to drop on anything like my hoof. So you normally be able to rotate the engine to a certain point, and then this would come up and slide over there, but obviously we've got issues. This crank's obviously ruined, so I don't really care about it. So if I can just pull it out, even if I pull the rotor out, it'd be great, but it's still just a bit seized in there. All right, yep. That come out enough now, I think. We might actually be pulling the rotor out. Oh no, crank's come out, there we go. Lifted it out high enough. All right, so it looks like this is the front side, that's the rear side. Both are in pretty average condition, so we'll put it aside and take a look at it shortly. All right, shaft. I mean, besides the rust on the end, the shaft doesn't look overly bad. You can see the bearing surfaces there, so I mean, you know, something like that could probably clean up okay-ish after you mic it up if it's okay, but I mean, because there's so much rust in it, it would need a lot of work. The front rotor looks worse, so to speak, than the rear one does. And this is jammed in there pretty good as well, like the other one was. Still stuff. So, whoop, all right, so there we go. It's basically seized in the housing and the housing's come off. So let's pop this over here. And then this is the last bit, the front plate. So that's another oil control ring. Right, let's get this off the engine stand, put it on the bench, and we'll go through it all and we'll have a bit of a debrief. So here's the engine in all its glory. Almost don't know where to start because it's in such bad condition, but maybe we'll start from front to back. So front, you have we have the timing cover, and in terms of salvageable parts of what you could use again for a refresh, this is a spacer. It's got the letter V there, you can see. That sets your end flow to how much the shaft can move back and forth, because you need some movement back and forth. So you could use that again. These tension bolts, a lot of them are rusted out, some aren't. You could use those. You can see this one's obviously rusted to the point where it's started to dissolve away, so you wouldn't be using those ones. This front counterweight looks all right. Oil pump drive gear looks all right. Chain looks all right. Crank angle sensor drive looks all right. And you probably wouldn't reuse them, but these Torrington bearings actually look all right as well. So front cover also could do with a cleanup, but it looks okay as well. And moving over to the meat and potatoes here, we've got this rotor, which is heavily carboned up, and it's got some kind of remnants of little worm type looking things. Every seal on this one's pretty much jammed in, although this one side seal's been pushed out a bit, but all the seals are jammed in. The oil control rings, which sit in here, have fallen out, which are these. So overall, but the bearings are in really good condition. For the bearings to be in that good of a condition for an engine that hasn't been apart for decades, I'm not so sure that's the case. So I reckon this has been refreshed at some point in time. possibly even just before that it finished running, because those bearings, there's like a grey coating on the outside of the bearings, and that grey coating doesn't stay around forever and a day. It eventually wears down and wears off. So after it wears off, you'll start seeing some copper show on the bearings. These still look very grey, which means they're still very new. So I would say potentially this engine was pulled down and maybe put together for just a refresh, and then it's had some kind of failure, possibly a water seal, gauged by how much water was actually in the engine, how much it's rusted there, and then it's just left alone to rot, basically. So, I mean, these engines, obviously, is heavy corrosion here. You would have to soak this in some kind of solution to try and get this corrosion off, and then see what the gaps actually are like in here. But yeah, it's more than likely you would never be using these again, which is a shame, because these are pretty sought after rotors. So this is the front iron. You can see 2 ports for the 6-port, and then a barrel valve in there which opens up. It's actuated when for higher RPM revving. This plate doesn't look too bad. If you take the water seals out, it doesn't look like there's any corrosion possibly in there. It just looks like the water seal's jammed in there. So possibly this plate could clean up and actually be okay. You know, there's obviously somewhere here from rust. How much of that's just that decaying onto here is another thing, but this front plate actually doesn't look too bad. It looks gross, that's for sure, but it doesn't look too bad. All right, moving on to the housing, and as you can see here, this this isn't so great. So it's pretty manky. I mean, there's a lot of rust there, but what's under the surface, if it's usable, who knows? But you can just see here, there's a step there where there is a lot of wear from basically an apex seal. An assist piece there is dragged all the way around. So yeah, we'd have to clean these up and have a look and see if they're any good. But again, the chrome on these is exceptionally good for an engine that would be 35 years old. So gauged on the wear of the housings here, I would also suggest that these housings were replaced whenever they did a full refresh on this. So I would say possibly this engine got a rebuild, and maybe something didn't go quite along the plans of when it got rebuilt, or maybe it was rebuilt for a race car and the race car overheated, blew a water seal, and then it was just parked up forever and a day. I believe that's where this engine come from. It come from a racing sort of background or whatever. Someone might have put this in a race car or something, and yeah, they had an engine water seal failure or something, and they just left it, and then that was it. It sat there for the last 20 years or something. So yeah, might have to clean these up at some point in time and have a look at their real condition. All right, so we'll put the housing aside. Shaft, as we went on before, the bearing surfaces look really good. It's just this rear area where the taper that the flywheel normally sits on is pretty bad. So I mean, you could clean this up, and this would actually probably be okay. Center plate, again, it's got a lot of corrosion on the face. I mean, you can have these plates lapped and they probably come up okay. But yeah, this side's a little bit worse. But again, if we clean that up and had a look at it, it might be okay. Moving to the rear of the engine, here you can see, so this housing's definitely no good in terms of, you can see this mark here. So that mark goes all the way around the housings, and that's basically ground in there. So that's no good at all. But yeah, the chrome's pretty good on this one too. It's got a little bit more wear on this one, and it feels like it's got a bit of chattering there. So some light chattering on those housings, and that normally is a sign of sort of detonation. So what happens is, you can see the apex seal here on the rotor moves up and down. And what happens when there's some detonation is the rotor basically, it violently hits the housing, and it can leave sort of like what looks like marks, repeated marks of an apex seal trace through that combustion, just above the combustion area, and that of the on the housing, and that that leads to a loss in compression, basically loss in performance. So it could have been, yeah, this engine might have rattled a bit, or you know, overheated, or bad fuel or something could be the reason why it was parked up. But none of the seals actually look broken. So I don't think it detonated heavily if it did detonate, because none of them, normally you'd see the apex seals broken. These are just the normal, the old style, what you would call 3-piece apex seals, and that is them right here. These were discontinued middle of sort of the RX8 run, and they moved to a 2-piece seal. Those 3-piece seals were actually pretty good back in the day. They sealed up really well. They sort of work on a wedge on a V, and they would force themselves out and seal really well against the housing. So all the aftermarket seals in that day are just all basically a 1-piece and an assist. Those were like a 2-piece seal with an assist piece of 3 pieces. So rear plate, if we have a look at it now, same kind of deal as the front. Doesn't look too bad. There's a little bit of corrosion in here and that, but the grooves all look pretty good. And again, if you wanted to clean this plate up and do it, it'd probably be okay. Rear gear here, and the bearing has got a bit of corrosion in it too, so is what it is. But realistically, this engine we got for nothing is just sort of a tear it down and see what it looks like. We knew what it was going to be looking like, considering it was seized in there. Overall, not quite as bad as I thought it might have been for an engine that's probably sat for close to 2 decades. A lot of carbon in there, so a bit of, you know, that carbon and the oil in the fuel mixture actually helps keep things normally pretty rust-free inside of these engines. But again, if water gets in, that's it. It's done. It's still they'll still rust. So yeah, overall not too shabby. Right, thanks for watching. That does it for this video. If you like watching more Rotary content, subscribe here. Don't forget to subscribe over on Full Boost, because there is absolutely monumental amounts of Rotary content over there. I've built 2 Rotary race cars over on Full Boost, and their full build series and full engine rebuild videos over there. If you really like this stuff, well, stay tuned. You've seen all the dirty stuff, but have a look at this. This is my new billet front plate from Billet Pro. So we'll be doing a video in the not too distant future of assembling this billet engine. So yeah, if you want to see that going forward, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be able to keep track of our RX7 race car on here and over on Full Boost, and all the Rotary content coming down the pipeline. Until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.